11 years, 9 months, 14 days, 9 hours. Any earlier, you're hurting the children. What age should kids start lifting weights? Parents in general have two main concerns before they ask their children to start lifting weights. One, of course, is injury risk. The other one is, will it stunt my child's growth? Let's talk about stunting growth for a moment. I think it's pretty clear that the biggest determinant in how tall we will grow to be is our genetics. Okay, so you can't change your family and your ancestry, so there's a limit to that. However, you can put yourself in the correct environment to grow as tall as possible. I always give the example of the basketball player Yao Ming. Yao Ming is one of the tallest guys ever to play in the NBA. And his wife, from what I read, is also on the China national team. So do you think that children have the genetics to be tall? For sure. As long as they're given the right nutrition, the right environment, they will be maximizing their genetic potential. So the thing that determines your height is your genetics. Then where does this false teaching about weightlifting stunting growth come from? I believe it's from parents watching weightlifting. And many of the great weightlifters are pretty short. They have short legs, short arms. The reason they have short legs and short arms is not because the weight compressed them. It's because every sport pre-selects certain body shapes at the top level. All of us can learn to do weightlifting. But to be the best of the best, it's better if you're short. A few reasons. A person that has short legs tends to have short arms and a longer torso. This makes it easier to get into the bottom position of many of the weightlifting movements. Also, if you're short, then it needs less distance for the bar to travel up. It's just easier to lift. Also, weightlifting is a weight category sport. That means that there's a limit to how heavy you can be before you have to go to the next weight class. Just imagine, if you need to be in a weight class that's, let's say, under 69 kilograms. If you are 2 meters tall and 69 kilograms, you'll be very skinny with almost no muscles. But if you're 160 cm and 69 kilograms, you can be very, very thickly muscled, very good for weightlifting. So weightlifting chooses short people because it's mechanically easier and it's great if you have a weight category that you have to fit into. The shorter and more thickly built you are, the better it is for that weight category. Something to show you that weightlifting doesn't make you short. Consider the guys in the super heavyweight category. That means that there's no limit, okay? They can be as heavy as they like. They can be 140, 150 kilos. In today's competition, super heavyweight is above 109 kilograms, okay? And the world champion right now is this guy called Lasha Tallahassee. He is 197 cm tall. This shows that when there's no weight limit, weightlifters can be really tall, big guys. He can lift 200 kilos over his head and make it look like nothing. That 200 kilos is not making him short. So weightlifting does not make you short. Weightlifting as a highly competitive sport at the top level will select body shapes that prefer short people. If you go by this faulty logic of certain sports making you short, then gymnastics makes you very short. Even though they don't lift weights, mostly they do body weight training. And now a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by my team and I at Genesis Gym Singapore, where you can get some of the finest personal training available either in one of our gyms or online. Check out the links below to find out more. Look at the world champion in parallel bars, Oleg Vernyayev. I hope I pronounced that right, okay? He's from the Ukraine. The Ukraine is not known for short people. Ukraine people are pretty big, but he, 161 cm tall, okay? He's short. If you look at 4-time Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles, probably the best gymnast America has ever produced. She's 4'8", okay, which is 142 cm. Gymnastics also selects short people because people who are short have more stable limbs. If you have short arms and legs, you can control them better. You also rotate faster, and many of these gymnastic movements require your body to rotate and spin in the air. And if you look at the progression of the sport of gymnastics, especially in the ladies category, the athletes are actually getting shorter, which is opposite for most sports where athletes are usually getting taller and bigger. Because the movements they have to do are getting more and more extreme and more exceptional, so only certain body types can do them well. So if sports make you short, gymnastics, guilty as charged. On the other end, let's talk about basketball. Is the average professional basketball player taller than the average person? For sure, he or she is taller. That's because the basket's in the air. That sport preferentially chooses tall people. It's not the basketball that makes you tall, it's the sport that pre-selects tall people. So I hope that debunks the idea that kids lifting weights makes them short. The next thing is that parents are afraid that kids get injured from lifting weights. Yes, everything has risk, kids get injured from all kinds of stuff. Lifting weights, however, is one of the least risky when coached correctly. Kids can get injured from all kinds of activities. But as parents, I myself included, we want our kids to do activities, but we want them to do it correctly. Weight training is no different. As long as it's well coached, the injury risk is super low. I'll give you some examples comparing other injury risks. Okay? For running, a kid is loading 3 to 4 times body weight on each knee when they run. No parents complain that kids shouldn't run around and be active. Parents also let kids play things like rugby. In rugby, a kid, when they do the scrum machine, is loading at least 1 time their body weight, and when they grow to secondary school age, the kid is loading 1.5 to even 2 times body weight for the stronger children. But parents don't think of these common sports or movements so much as a high injury risk. But somehow parents are fearful of lifting weights even when the weight is only a half or a third of their child's body weight. This reasoning is not strong because first, the load is less than many contact sports and high-speed sports that kids play, and the movement is much more controlled, which means that doing exercise that's properly trained and coached in the gym is a very controlled environment. The weight is going to be here, you're going to move it to here at this speed, and that's all. But in other sports, basketball, soccer, rugby, people are running and bumping you and tackling you and pushing you from multiple different angles. It's a much less controllable environment. So weightlifting actually, in comparison, is an extremely safe activity when the child learns it correctly. So I hope now as parents or educators, you're less fearful of putting a child in an environment where they're going to lift weights. There are also super big benefits to lifting weights for children. One of which is that they learn a set of fundamental movement skills. Athletic weight training, not the bodybuilding stuff where you get a big pump in your arms, okay? The athletic movements in weight training closely replicate all kinds of sports, okay? So they learn the movement skills that actually protect them in other sports because you're learning to do this movement with a load on your body. So later when you have to do it in a sport with no load or less load, it's actually very easy and it helps you do sports movements properly and safely. The most important movement actually that I see is jumping and landing. If you can do it with a load, you can definitely do it when it's unloaded and your muscles will be strong, so the weight goes onto your muscles and the impact goes onto your muscles and not your joints. Continuing on that topic, doing strength training with weights actually builds muscle, and muscles take load and protect the joints. Some parents might ask, why not just do body weight? Yes, you could do it with body weight, but in my opinion, it would just take longer and it'd be less efficient because certain movement patterns that the body can do can be loaded heavier more quickly than others. But the body weight doesn't change over time, and so it can be difficult to adjust the difficulty of the exercise to that person's skill level and strength level. Another great thing that well-coached strength training does is it teaches the child to brace their body for impact or fast movements. You may or may not know that your torso muscles and the so-called your core muscles' main function is not to do sit-ups. Your core muscles' main function is to transfer force from the upper to lower body and from the lower body to the upper body. So it's meant to actually be stable. It's meant to resist movement. So when the child is put under a load, that torso has to stiffen itself up. And this allows it to protect the spine and actually teaches the child to reflexively tense up when he's going to play any sport or do any rapid movement. This is a very important injury prevention mechanism that can be well trained by strength training. And finally, strength training actually does the opposite of stunting your growth. Strength training maximizes the growth that you can have. Because when you do strength training, the recovery process of strength training increases growth hormone output. Because you strain your muscles, you're working hard, your muscles want to grow, there will be a higher growth hormone output. This growth hormone also is the same growth hormone that increases height. So strength training will actually give you the best chance to reach your genetic maximum height potential. It won't change who your parents are and what genetics they give you, but it can maximize the genetics that you do have. So to maximize a child's strength training, here are my tips. So what age should children start lifting weights at? There's no fixed age. The reason is that children mature at different speeds, both emotionally and physically. In my experience, we've had children as old as 12 or 13 years old, and I've had to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't take you as a client now because the child is not able to take instructions properly and they would endanger themselves or endanger the people around them. On the other hand, we've had children as young as 6 or 7 that we've allowed to be clients at Genesis Gym because they're able to take instruction and they're a bit more mature emotionally that they can handle the coaching. The next thing is physical age. Children mature at different speeds. So some children by age 12, they can do almost everything an adult can do. While others who mature physically at a slower speed, we may need to be more cautious and slower in their progression. But not to worry, from what I've read, children that hit puberty later actually end up with a higher overall height. So it's not really a disadvantage. It's just that when they're younger and not physically as mature, you want to focus on the movements but not so much on the heavier loads. The next thing that's really important, parental support and parental attitude. I think many parents are supportive of their children being physically active and physically fit. But I'd like to add on to that. Physical fitness is so important to life that it's very important that kids don't learn to hate it. Unfortunately, as parents, we want our kids to do their best, to be the best they can be. We push them to do all kinds of different activities, but we want to push them in a loving way that does not force them to do things until they hate it. Because if they hate activity now, it's going to increase the risk that they're going to hate it when they're older, and that'll increase their risk of health problems and obesity and all those kind of diabetes and chronic illness. So I want to be a parent who encourages the child but lets them go at their own pace. They have to decide that yes, I want to be strong, mommy and daddy. I want to be able to run faster, mommy and daddy. And then we encourage them to go into the different kinds of strength training. The next thing for kids is they must learn perfect technique when they're young. I consider learning how to lift weights kind of like a tuition for physical fitness. It's a life skill that I want my kids to learn. So we want them to be perfect when they're young, and as they get older, they can add weight, right? But when they're young, the movements must be perfect. And when they're young, learning the movements ingrains it in their brain. This is why, from my experience, actually when I coach people, I find the hardest age group to coach is currently about 45 to 50, okay? Nothing personal, but they seem to have the most movement and joint problems. I would actually say that my father's generation, currently maybe 65 to 70, they of course have chronic illness, of course they've grown overweight, but they actually have relatively few joint problems and movement problems. When you teach them a movement, they actually learn it quite fast, oftentimes faster than someone that's 45 to 50. I believe the reason is that at that generation, when they were young, in the formative years, when the brain is learning movements, their default play option was run around in the jungle, in the village, barefoot, catch spiders and chase each other around. Once it got to the slightly younger generation, maybe the 45-year-olds, we started being pushed into a more academic system in Asian context, where sitting down and reading and learning the mental side of things and the studying academic side of things became of prime importance, sometimes at the expense of physical movement. So we didn't learn the movement skills when we were young, and then after age 12, it's much harder to pick them up. The brain is less pliable and less plastic, so it's less able to learn movement skills well. It's almost impossible to see a person who was not given the opportunity to move and learn movement at a young age, didn't do it by age 11 or 12, who suddenly becomes super coordinated in their teens and becomes a champion gymnast. All the best athletes had a lot of movement in their life when they were young. So perfect movement skills, which includes rolling, tumbling, learning how to fall, learning how to jump and catch and throw, all these skills are very important when a child is young, and the movements in proper strength training are a subset of these skills. If you have these skills, the child is more likely to be good at movement and enjoy training because they're competent. And so they'll enjoy physical activity and it will keep them healthy long term. When a child is young, they want to focus on speed with light loads, okay? Because speed, the way the nervous system connects the muscles to move fast, is a skill that's learned when you're young. Okay, so speed with light loads. Also, you want to have moderate loads with some speed, and also you want moderate loads with higher reps to build up the tendon strength and also the muscle size. What is probably best to avoid is super heavy loads where it's grinding and takes 10 seconds to do one rep. Those things we can leave for pure strength development if the child has that interest and after puberty. A child should also do full range of motion movements. Okay, so it's been studied that your body gets strong in the angle that you train plus minus about 15 degrees. So if we only do short movements, we only get strong in that short range, which leaves the brain unable to coordinate the rest of the movement as well because you didn't train in that range of motion. And of course, a joint that's unable to coordinate the whole range of motion is also a joint that's at higher risk of injury. And if you didn't learn these skills when you're young, it can be learned, but it's just harder to learn as you get older. Finally, it's very important for children to do a large variety of movements. I mentioned before, strength training, whether you do squats or Olympic lifts or jumps, these are great, but you also want to do all kinds of multiple sports. Okay, so to maximize a child's physical development, there's no best sport. You want to do maybe a few months of multiple different sports. So maybe a few months of wrestling, a few months of basketball, a few months of track and field throwing, a few months of gymnastics, and so on. This wide variety of movements builds the strongest pool of movements that the brain knows. And once the child becomes, let's say, 14 to 16 for most sports, they can start to specialize. Because now they will be an exceptional athlete with great movement. And they can choose whatever sport they want to specialize in, and they'll become really good at the sport. If you're clumsy, you will never be a great athlete. So give the child multiple movement skills when young and do not specialize until they're probably 14 to 16 or even older. There is a very weak correlation between who is champion at 9 years old and who becomes Olympic champion. But it's a strong correlation between mid-teens and Olympic champion, right? Because at that age they start to specialize after they've had a great foundation of many movements. I hope this video has helped parents and educators remove the fear of children lifting weights. I hope it's demonstrated some of the benefits, and I hope that with the tips, you can get the most benefits with the minimum risk and the best development for the children. Hope you found this video useful. Subscribe to my channel for more educational content.